So the current instability and fighting in Libya really stems from the legacy of a revolution in 2011, which overthrew Muammar Gaddafi. Successive governments really made no attempt to bridge the social divisions that were reinforced by that revolution, and that, combined with the emergence of militia groups as the real power in the country, led to a sustained effort, both political and military, to isolate those perceived not to have supported the revolution. So society and politics quickly became more and more polarised, and that really culminated in the fighting that erupted in Tripoli in August of this year. So this dynamic has led to the formation of two broad military coalitions. We've got the Islamists on one hand. In the west, that's the Muslim Brotherhood and representatives of the city-state of Misrata, which came to prominence during the revolution. In the east, you've got far more jihadist-orientated militias, notably Ansar al-Sharia in Benghazi. Now, facing them, you've got a very loose coalition of tribes from the centre of Libya and former government forces under Gaddafi. They're led in the east by a renegade general named Khalifa Haftar, who, while he doesn't have the sanction of the official Libyan government, has managed to rally much of the Libyan military behind his cause due to the lack of political leadership up until this point. So really those are the two poles of fighting in Libya at the moment. You've got two distinct battlefields, if you like, Tripoli in the west and Benghazi in the east. So what's different about this fighting this time is that each side has extended their network of alliances to the tribes and militias throughout the rest of the country. So really, while we've seen fighting before in Libya, this round has a very real danger of escalating throughout the country, and in particular towards the oil fields in the south, from which Libya derives much of its income. So what we're looking at going forwards with the Islamists is an increased likelihood of their coalition fracturing, and those divisions are going to become more apparent between the Muslim Brotherhood-orientated militias, who are in theory committed to the democratic process and are certainly interested in preserving their business interests, which they've accrued since the revolution, and the more radical Islamist jihadist militias. So we're looking at an increased likelihood of further fighting in Tripoli between these two groups as that coalition falls apart. What is certain is that the Islamists certainly can't put together any cohesive form of governance for Libya, so really they are primarily a military power rather than a political power. So the outlook for Libya over the next few years is really profoundly negative. Even in the best case scenario, the government's highly unlikely to be able to extend its authority across the country. So we'd be looking at a continuation of rule by local militias and tribes, and very tenuous government authority in terms of law and order and the restoration of law and order. We're also looking at increasing likelihood of de facto partition between east and west, as the current Libyan government is located in the east, having fled Tripoli as a result of the fighting over the summer. So there's an increased likelihood that that government will stay in the east. It'll take advantage of the slightly increased stability in the eastern oil sector to gain its revenues, while in the west we're likely to see increased fighting between various factions of both the Islamist coalition and various tribes, both around Tripoli and in the southwest of the country over the oil fields. So the problem with mediating a peaceful resolution to Libya's problems is that its regional neighbours, Algeria, Egypt, are primarily interested in containing instability within Libya and preventing spillover into their own borders. So really those countries and others, including notably the UAE and Sudan and Qatar, really serve as spoilers in the current instability in Libya, that they're more interested in backing each faction for their own domestic political purposes rather than coming in as a mediatory role to settle the dispute. So in the absence of any credible third party, both external or domestic, really the prospect of any prolonged peace or return to stable governance in Libya is fairly bleak.